We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. Isaiah 65:17-25, written centuries before Christ, uses the poetry of prophecy to paint a word picture of a world radically changed by a new thing that Yahweh will do. Originally, of course, it was written to encourage the post-exilic Jewish community. They were home, but home wasn't heaven. They needed hope that it would get better. Reading this Jewish text gives us hope too, hope that we can imagine. The setting is Jerusalem after the return of the exiles. Years have passed, and much has been accomplished. Walls have been erected and the temple has been rebuilt. Still, much of the city is still rubble. The new temple is but a pale shadow of the one that the Babylonians destroyed so many years earlier. The people have lived through a number of difficult years, in some respects more difficult than the years of their exile. They must wonder whether this patched-together Jerusalem is the full measure of their inheritance. They must wonder if Yahweh has the power and will to restore their former glory. Their concerns are reflected in chapters 63 and 64, which are answered by God's promises in our lesson. Our first verse says, "See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind." The mention of creating new heavens and a new earth takes us back to the opening chapters of Genesis where, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. With each act of creation, God pronounced the creation good, but the introduction of sin in Genesis 3 defiled the good creation. Nothing has been the same since. But God is going to redeem the situation by creating new heavens and a new earth. This does not mean that He is going to destroy what exists and begin anew from nothing. This is to be a transformation similar to the rebirth to which Jesus alludes in his conversation with Nicodemus, John 3. Additionally, God will forgive and forget Israel's rebelliousness and sin and the judgment that resulted. The former things will be relegated to a dim and unremembered past, hidden from God's sight. Verse 18 says, "But be glad and rejoice forever in what I will create, for I will create Jerusalem to be a delight and its people a joy." In verse 13 of this chapter, God said, "My servants shall rejoice, but you shall be disappointed." But now that God is creating new heavens and a new earth, and is pushing the former iniquities out of sight and out of mind, the people can be glad and rejoice forever in what God is creating. The New Jerusalem will not only be a joy to them, but will also be a joy to God and its people, will be a delight to Him. Verse 19 says, "I will rejoice over Jerusalem and take delight in my people, the sound of weeping and of crying will be heard in it no more." Israel's condition in the time of the prophet is being contrasted with conditions in the New Jerusalem, the kingdom of the Messiah. That kingdom is not an improved version of the old Israelite kingdom, but is something entirely new. It is a new creation, where the quality of life will be different from that of the present world. Sorrow will be replaced by rejoicing. The people will have cause for rejoicing, because the sound of weeping and the cry of distress will be but distant memories. Life will not be cut short except where God acts in judgment. Verse 20 says, "Never again will there be in it, an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his years. The one who dies at 100 will be thought a mere child, the one who fails to reach 100, will be considered accursed." People will no longer have their lives cut short. Both infants and the elderly will enjoy improved prospects for longevity. This is not a promise that death will be no more as in the New Testament, Revelation 21:4, but is instead a promise of longevity. The mention of 100 years is hyperbole, exaggeration for effect, because we have no record of people of that time, routinely living to be more than 100 years old. The point is that people in the new era will experience significantly longer lives. Verse 21 says, "They will build houses and dwell in them, they will plant vineyards and eat their fruit." The Old Testament includes a number of futility curses imposed by God on sinful people. "You shall betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her, you shall build a house, and you shall not dwell therein, you shall plant a vineyard, and shall not use its fruit." Deuteronomy 28:30. But now we have the opposite of the futility curse, a blessing that cancels the curse, a promise that those who labor will enjoy the fruits of their labors. Verse 22 says, "No longer will they build houses and others live in them, or plant and others eat. For as the days of a tree, so will be the days of my people, my chosen ones will long enjoy the work of their hands." The first part reiterates in slightly different words the promise of verse 21. People admire trees for many reasons: their beauty, their productivity, and their strength. Here it is their longevity that is in. We are accustomed to seeing beautiful, productive, and strong trees that were here long before we were born, and will be here long after we die. Most of us would be glad to trade our human longevity for tree longevity. The promise here, again hyperbole exaggeration for effect, is that people will enjoy the kind of longevity that is routine for trees. The last part repeats the promise of verses 21 that people shall build houses, and inhabit them, etc. The added dimension is the phrase, "my chosen." God chose Israel many centuries earlier, but they had sinned. The result was the futility curse of Deuteronomy 28:30. That curse is now reversed, so that God's chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Verse 23 says, "They will not labor in vain, nor will they bear children doomed to misfortune, for they will be a people blessed by the Lord, they and their descendants with them." To understand this phrase, we have only to look at the world around us. In many places, women bear children who die of malnutrition or disease. They live in neighborhoods where they are not safe walking to and from school. They are tempted to engage in drugs, binge drinking, reckless driving, promiscuous sex, and a host of other dangerous activities. But the promise of this verse is that my chosen will not bear children doomed to misfortune. A woman contemplating childbirth could be assured that her child would not be a child of calamity, but would instead be a child blessed by the Lord. The promise extends not just to that child, but also to its children and their children. This reverses the curse that visits the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and on the children's children, on the third, and on the fourth generation, Exodus 34:7, a curse that we often see in effect today, as children of drug addicts and other dysfunctional adults suffer for the sins of their parents. Verse 24 says, "Before they call I will answer, while they are still speaking I will hear." This is a lovely promise. While we have experienced the power of prayer, we have also experienced its frustration. Sometimes we wonder if God really hears our prayers, because we don't get the answers that we expect. At other times, we find ourselves trying to pray but not knowing how, or mouthing clumsy words that seem inadequate to express the longings of our hearts, or we fall asleep while trying to pray, or we want to pray for someone but forget to do so. This verse suggests that our inadequacy in prayer is no barrier to communicating with God. He is quite capable of understanding our clumsiest prayers, even the unspoken prayers of our hearts. Our final verse says, "The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox, and dust will be the serpent's food. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord." Much earlier the prophet promised, "The wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf, the young lion, and the fattened calf together, and a little child will lead them." Isaiah 11:6. Now Yahweh reiterates the promise that my chosen will see a world where predators coexist in peace with prey. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. They shall not hurt or destroy. It's an image of nonviolence and reconciliation. In Genesis 3:14, God cursed the serpent, saying, "On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life." Now God says once again that the serpent's food shall be dust, suggesting that the serpent will no longer be a threat to other life. This then, represents a danger neutralized, another facet of a newly peaceful world. The holy mountain is Mount Zion, on which Jerusalem and the temple are located, the dwelling place of God and holy ground to the faithful. This is a promise, expressed in poetic language, that God's people will again enjoy peaceful lives on God's mountain. God's kingdom of peace. A series of contrasts are either stated or implied in our lesson. Weeping to rejoicing, an infant that lives a few days, to a person who lives to be old, an old person dying early, to an old person living beyond 100 years. From build and another inhabit, to build and inhabit, from plant and another eat to plant and eat, from labor in vain, to enjoy the work of their hands. Bear children for calamity, to offspring blessed by the Lord, unanswered prayer, to answered prayer, violence to peace. Let's grab the opportunity to be in the new kingdom of God. God's kingdom of peace. 1. God's kingdom forgets the former things, Isaiah 65:20. This does not suggest literal lack of memory, rather, it is like God saying, "I will remember their sins no more," Jeremiah 31:34. It means He will choose not to call to mind or to hold against us our past sins. 2. God's kingdom values life, Isaiah 65:20. The sadness of death reminds us that we live in a fallen world that needs restoration. But God plans to turn this around. Long healthy life and the value of life will be realized. 3. God's kingdom values personal responsibility, Isaiah 65:21. God's chosen ones will fully enjoy the work of their hands and will take responsibility for themselves. People will have a hand in making something, growing something, doing something. 4. God's kingdom values ownership, Isaiah 65:22. When God fixes this world, people will not seek to take what belongs to someone else. There will be no marauders or governments seizing what you worked for. There will be no entitled people believing if you have such and such, you owe part of it to them. 5. God's kingdom elevates prayer, Isaiah 65:24. People will pray kingdom-oriented prayers. God will be close, the fellowship will be sweet. Nothing will be there that will hinder prayer on our part or God answering on His. 6. God's kingdom brings peace at all levels, Isaiah 65:24. This is seen in all breathing creatures getting along. Only Jesus can do that. Only the Prince of Peace can make that change. In your heart, in our world. Only He can restore. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.